So we all saw the shocking news that the Sixers are no longer pursuing Paul George, at least until after the NBA draft. I already dropped 2 videos kind of talking about that conversation, as well as a live stream with Cliff Jackson over there. But I did want to talk a little about in this video about one of the alternatives that has popped up pretty soon after the report. A lot of that stemmed up due to the Bulls' decision to trade Alex Caruso, and it does seem like they are in a little bit more of a selling mode than many expected. Caruso being the first player that organization has traded since 2021, which I do think is organizational malpractice. But nonetheless, I want to talk about Zach LaVine and the chances of him coming to the Philadelphia 76ers. So right off the bat here, we got a little bit of conflicting information that pretty shortly after the trade of Caruso and the news that the Sixers are no longer pursuing Paul George came out, we got this report here saying that the Bulls are in active trade discussions with the Utah Jazz and Philadelphia 76ers surrounding Zach LaVine. So it's been reported there's been as many as 15 trade offers to these 3 teams. The Kings are also involved in these types of conversation, looking to package Zach LaVine. Now, it should not be a surprise that the Bulls are looking to move on from Zach LaVine. That is one of the worst kept secrets around the NBA, and frankly, I do think he's a guy that is a primetime candidate that needs a change of scenery. But not so soon that it could be the Sixers, as shortly after we got this report from Kyle Neubeck saying that spoke to a league source who said the Sixers' position on Zach LaVine has not changed since the trade deadline. Philly is not interested in pursuing. What I think is particularly interesting is that he said a league source now. So Neubeck, much more well-versed on the Sixers side of things, the guy that I would consider as the gold standard for a Sixers reporter in today's modern ecosystem, that he's saying a league source told him, but nonetheless, a little bit of conflicting information there. Now, my honest read on what happened is Daryl Morey saw this trade of the Chicago Bulls sending away Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, and mind you, this coming just a couple months after the Bulls rejected 2 first-round picks for Caruso at the deadline, as well as reports that they've been offered up to a top 10 first-round pick and additional first-round picks for Caruso and said no, and they just walked back with just Josh Giddey. I think Daryl Morey said, I might be able to fleece these guys. Let me see what they're asking for. That's what I think mostly the phone call is about. Now, I do want to talk about the concept of Zach LaVine and if he could be a guy that could help the Sixers team. I'll start by taking a look at his stats for this year. He averaged 19.5 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 3.9 assists, shot 45.2% from the field, 34.9% from beyond the three-point arc, did shoot 45.2% on corner threes. He is just 29 years old, 6'5". 44.9% of his shots are three-pointers. And something that I do think is interesting to note with Zach LaVine is there are some connections here to the Sixers' current stars, that he does train with Drew Hanlon, who is Joel Embiid's primary trainer, as well as Jason Tatum and a number of other successful NBA players. Tyrese Maxey also has trained with Hanlon a little bit. And there also is the connection between Zach LaVine and Tyrese Maxey directly, as they are both New Balance athletes that they've filmed commercials together. They're also both Clutch Sports athletes, represented by Rich Paul and the Clutch family there. So there is some at least overlap here. But what that spells out to me completely is for the Sixers to be willing to pursue this, you need Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey to be able to vouch for this man, because I'm not ready if I'm able to look at it. That I don't think we can overlook some of the things that went down this year and overall in Zach LaVine's career. That I do think it's unfair to just look at this year's stats, as if we do take the wider view, you can see where the better player is. That just last season, 24.8 points per game, 4.2 assists, 4.5 rebounds. Also shot the ball a little bit better, 37.5% on 7.1 three-point attempts per game. Also flashback a little further, back in the 2020-2021 season, he was shooting 41.9% on three-point attempts on 8.2 three-point attempts per game. That's a really nice combination of efficiency and volume there. He is a guy who's been an all-star in 2 seasons. And I also would like to point out that he very much carries this injury-prone reputation, and you can see why when looking at this, that he's played 77 games as a rookie, all 82 games in his second season, and it was pretty much downhill from there. That he went 47 games, 24 games, 63 games, 60 games, 58, 67, 77, and then 25. So I don't think it's as necessarily fair to maybe the reputation of him is, but certainly not a model of constantly being on the court there. Now, when you think about the best version of Zach LaVine as a basketball player, him playing to his peak, it does make sense within the flow of the Sixers team that he can play on and off ball. I think he's really effective in the dribble handoff game, which is something the Sixers run a lot of, and I think Joel Embiid is particularly efficient at and really good in that. I don't think they have the proper guys to capitalize on that. The clear example of the DHOs working was with JJ Redick and Joel Embiid. Thought Buddy Hield could potentially be that guy, and he really did not prove to be this year. Seth Curry was another dude who did it at a very high level. I think Zach LaVine can be even a step above all of these guys because there is a little bit more playmaking to Zach LaVine. Curry could play make a little bit, but there wasn't quite this quick twitch ability that Zach LaVine certainly carries. That LaVine can both let it fly from well beyond the three-point arc or drive and slam it on your head from the dunk as a dunking spot there. So I do think LaVine's a little bit more polished as an overall offensive talent. But what really the conversation here is not, is Zach LaVine, what can he bring to the Sixers team? But it's more so, what other doors are you closing by bringing him in? And that more has to do with the salary cap and contract situation as well as the assets that would take to get him. But I did want to start with the contract here. That as of now, Zach LaVine on the books for $43 million this year, $45.9 million next year, and then $48.9 million in 26 and 27. And what that means to me is that Zach LaVine would be the move, and you have to know that is the case going in. I don't feel as great about it in that context. And I do think the market price for Zach LaVine is cheaper now than it probably should be or may ever be again. But there are some red flags that we can't overlook. Let's start with once again pulling up the season in which he played just 25 games. The Bulls got better after he was shut down. And by the way, with him being shut down, there was an elective surgery that he did take. He essentially took himself out of the trade conversation and trade rumors by saying, well, I got to get this injury cleaned up. This is something that I'm going to address, and then we're going to do this dance again next year. Those checks are going to keep cashing no matter what. I don't love that outlook for a guy as a player. Now, I don't want to judge or think maybe that was definitely an issue that was hampering him, or he felt he could not play to his peak and then he's not playing up to his trade value to get teams to get it. There's ways that you can look at this where you can understand it from Zach LaVine's perception, absolutely. But the bottom line is he did kind of bail on his guys, and then when he did bail, we saw Kobe White play like a borderline all-star player in a very similar role to what Zach LaVine was asked to do, which really opened my eyes. And Kobe White's a guy that I like quite a bit, have always liked since his college days, but he's had a really bizarre trajectory where he looked like this young promising talent, then kind of fall off the face of the earth, and then all of a sudden this year put it all together. If you had the same ingredients that Zach LaVine was working with, why was there not a little bit of more success with Zach LaVine, who once again had a down year, 19.5 points per game, which is 5 points lower than just last season, and the lowest that he has scored since the 2017-2018 season. That is not what you want to see there. So when we're having these Zach LaVine conversations, for me, this is less about how I actually feel about Zach LaVine and more about closing the doors that they're going to by bringing him in. That if you do take on this $43 million contract, you're not also bringing in a DeJounte Murray or a Mikal Bridges or a Brandon Ingram or a Paul George or whatever name you want to throw in the mix. Zach LaVine would be the guy, and I don't know if I feel great about that. And again, I do think that he is very much a guy that will benefit from a change of scenery and will likely outperform expectations in a major way. I think the Sacramento Kings are my personal preference, where I think it makes sense for him to land there, but obviously a deal has to occur here. Based on what the going rate is for the Alex Carusos of the world, I do think LaVine ends up getting shipped off, and I don't think it takes a ton to get him. But for the Sixers, you have to have a really strong look about if that is the option, and honestly, I lean no. A great deal of my optimism or my hope for Zach LaVine to potentially be a member of the Sixers was if he was attached to Alex Caruso, and all of a sudden we're talking about a Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, Joel Embiid, and then whoever that fifth starter is, whether it is a Nico Batum or a Kelly Oubre, or maybe even a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or another guy that you could bring in like that. That's some really intriguing stuff from a rotational standpoint. With Caruso not being a part of it, I'm not as bullish on Zach LaVine being a possibility. I do like Zach LaVine. I do like his game. I think he's going to be better in the new location than he's getting the respect for. I think he's going to be a guy that is a good buy low target for a lot of teams, but I don't think the Sixers quite fit that conversation here. That I think it's a bit too big of a risk. Once again, if push comes to shove and this becomes option E, if the Sixers straight up strike out of the plate on LeBron James, Paul George, Brandon Ingram, all these names they want to work down and they got nothing left, I don't hate it as a Hail Mary try something, but this has to be at the far end of your list. And if you do hop and go bring in LaVine right now, you're sacrificing the potential opportunity to even bring in some of these better names. So let me know if you guys disagree with me in the comments, but that's pretty much where I'm at for Zach LaVine. That I am intrigued. I don't want to close the door completely, but he's certainly down there, option E or option F, that I have a lot of guys on to work through and officially get the no and the door slammed in my face until that is the case. I absolutely would not make a trade for Zach LaVine, at least until after the NBA draft, and definitely not till even after free agency starts. That I do want them to see things through, and I'm also not entirely ruling out that this Paul George stuff is just a smokescreen. So we will see what it all happens from here. It is nice to see the NBA news cycle fully churning, that there is some things happening. It is about to get even more crazy once free agency and the draft does kick off. So make sure you are subscribing to the channel so keep it locked and tapped in for all of that. Drop a like on this video to let me know that you're listening, and any comments that you have below. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning into this video here, and I will talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.